Here we have the go-kart that we modeled in the first two DVDs in this series. And in this set of chapters, we're going to look at modeling some of the elements of the go-kart using splines. These elements that we're going to look at, they only really make sense if you model them using splines. It's the easiest way to model them, and therefore we're going to use the spline-based tools. We're going to use a combination of the three tools that we've looked at in this DVD. We're going to use extrude, we're going to use lathe, and we're going to use loft. And I'm going to use them interchangeably. I'm not really going to stick to using them in any particular order. In this chapter, we're going to look at making some minor modifications to the steering column here. And we're going to add basically an addition to the top here, which will allow the steering wheel to lock onto it. And we're also going to add a screw thread down to the bottom here, which will poke out to the bottom of a nut. And will just be a little finesse, basically, just something to make it look a little bit better, a little bit more accurate. And it isn't something that you necessarily want to do on a real model, actually add screw threads everywhere. But in this case, it'll just show you how we can use some of the tools in concert to improve the look and quality of this particular model. So let's get down to action. What I'll do is I'll hide the frame here because we don't really need to be able to see it. We'll just leave the guide in place so we can actually see where the frame should be. And for now, I'm going to leave these elements all frozen because I don't want to actually touch them. But later on in this chapter, I'm going to unfreeze these elements because I want to be able to align to them and put our elements into place. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create basically an extension onto here, onto which the center of the steering column will be placed. And for that, I just need to move this down here a little bit because we're going to extend it. And also I'm going to pull this in a bit here too, just to make sure that we can't see the end here. I just want to put an extension here that I'll make myself. So firstly, let's just unfreeze these elements for a moment. And I'll just move this down into position. So let's go and choose local as the coordinate system. We'll just move it down here a little bit. You can see it's poking out the end here some now. We'll just change the height using the spinner here. There we are, that's fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift and drag this down here. I just want to make a copy of it. And I'm just going to make this stick out the end here, but I'm going to make it thinner. So let me just push this in here, change the radius so it's nice and thin. And now we'll change the height, so just zero it at first. That's the easiest thing to do, and then make it stick out here. That'll do for now. I may actually adjust it later. We'll just change the fillet a little bit as well. There we are. And I think this position is fine now. So let's have a look at the radius that we have here. It's 0.79. Just change that so it's a slightly rounder number, 0.8. And what I need to do now is create a circle, which is that kind of diameter. So I'm just going to turn on the grid by pressing G. I'm going to go into splines, and I'm going to create a circle. I'm just going to draw it here. And it doesn't really matter where it is in the world because that doesn't really matter. It's got its own pivot point, that's all that really matters at this point. Let's have a look at the size of it. Well, it's 2. Let's try changing that to 0.8. And you should find now that the size of this and this match. Now, obviously, we have a bevel here on the edge here. So let's just make that a little bit smaller, a little bit sharper, maybe even sharper again. There we are, that's nice and hard edge now. And we need to make our extension a little bit smaller than this because it needs to fit in here inside the bevel. So I'm just going to make this 0.7. I think that'll probably do the trick. And then I'm going to press Z, zoom in. And here's the shape that we're going to be extending outwards. Obviously, if I extended it at the moment, we're just going to end up with a circle, which isn't really very interesting. So what I need to do is I want to put some lugs in here, and those lugs will mean that when we fit the steering wheel onto it, it will actually have some purchase, so that when you twist the wheel, it'll actually be locked into the rod, and it'll be nice and strong. So to do that, I'm just going to go to the top viewport, and I'm going to, let's say, create a rectangle here. Just draw it like this. I'm going to just use the snap tool here. I'm going to use quick snap. So I can just click on there and it's automatically aligned to it. I'm going to change the width slightly. So it's that kind of width. We don't want it to be too big, this lug in here, otherwise it would actually make this weak. So let's just make it a little bit thinner. In like that. I think that's fine. Now what I need to do is, I want to cut this shape out of the circle using the spline boolean tools that I showed you earlier in the DVD. But I don't want it to cut a hole all the way through. I just wanted to create some lugs in here. So first I'm going to actually boolean this shape with a copy of itself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down E. Actually, we're trying to rotate in parent space, so let me just change that back to world or local. I think local would make more sense in this case. We need to have this turned on, rotation snaps, so I'm just going to rotate this through 90 degrees. That will be fine, but we need to do that with hold down shift. So we make a copy of it. That's cool. And if you look at that now, we're going to basically cut this shape here out of the center of this, and this will give us two rectangles. So this needs to be maybe a little bit thicker. So, and these are the shapes that we're actually aiming to cut out here. And I think that's looking cool. So now we can go here, right click, convert to editable spline. We're just going to attach this and this. So now we have those. Go into spline mode, and what we're going to do is we're going to get this shape and we're going to cut this shape out of it. So I'm going to go to Boolean, and I believe it's subtraction that we want to go for. So now I just need to click on this shape, and there we are. It's given us the shape that we need, these two rectangles. And now I'm going to select this shape here, and I'm going to say Boolean again is subtraction. Click here. That's given us one of the shapes. And again, Boolean subtraction. Click here. And now we have the shape that we need. I'm something of a bevel freak. You know, I love to have bevels on my models because it really does help lighting, because that's one of my main jobs as a TD. I'm a lighting TD. So when you're creating a model, it's a good idea to have these bevels. And these are at the moment mathematically perfect corner points. So that isn't so great as a model. So we're going to go into vertex mode. We're going to refine. We're just going to add some points in here. And we're going to do so here as well. Let's just do this here and here. Let me just change the interpolation. I just want to increase a little bit more. So we get these nice curves here and here. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. Just put a point there, 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 and there. Just move that in slightly. Okay, now what I want to do is I just want to make sure that these are just linear. I don't want these bevels to be anything too complex. So I'm going to say these are corner. And now I'm just going to move this down here at the same time as moving this one, so we get a uniform change on both. Just basically aim for something which is near 45 degrees. Pretty good. Same here. Select these two vertices at the same time. Not bad. Let's see what happens if we grab these. Well, it's not bad, but because these are Beziers, you can see these handles are pointing in the original direction. So we probably want to go in and edit those in a second. Do the same here. Just grab these and move it down. What we're aiming for eventually is a kind of 45 degrees, so roughly in the right place. And then we need to go in and edit these. So just make sure that I've got X and Y axis chosen. I'm just going to move this until it's kind of here. Now we got this nice round edge here. Same thing over here. Select, move it down. That's great. Same thing here. I don't have to be super precise here. This is, as I said in earlier DVDs, this is not meant to be used for manufacture. It's just meant to look good. So if it looks good, it is good. So there we are. Now we have a nice shape. If we extrude this now, it'll produce some nice bevels on these corners. But before we do that, we want to think ahead, because this is one of the features of splines, is that it's very easy to use one spline to create an object. But if you need to create more objects, why don't you use the same spline to create those as well? Because it's going to be accurate and it's going to be fast to do. So what we want to do at this point is we want to add another shape into the mix, but we're actually going to make it in another object. So I'm just going to, let me just zoom in here, select this, and let's see if I can actually outline this. What I want to do is I want to create an outline of this, which is actually slightly larger. So let me try doing a type in. Well, first of all, let's try doing it manually. Yeah, it's going to give us too big a kind of shape. So let's try 0.5. Yeah, that's huge. It's also going in the wrong direction, so it's minus 0.01, let's say. That's actually not bad, is it? Pretty good. We haven't got any sort of vertices that are crashing into each other, producing a nice looking shape. And if we zoom out, we can see that it's a reasonable distance. Don't forget this is a very small shape here. So if you can imagine, that's a reasonable tolerance for then fitting this shape onto something else. Now, you may be wondering what I'm doing here. I'm not really explaining myself very clearly. So this is going to be the center of the steering column. And then what we want is actually the central hub of the steering wheel. So that's what I'm trying to create here. I'm going to create this hub at the same time. Now, this hub is going to be circular. So, well, basically circular anyway. So what I want to do is I want to create a circle now. And I want to just snap that to this. And let's have a look at the size of it. That's actually quite small, isn't it? So let's just make this a little bit larger till we get to the kind of size that we think would look good. Yeah. Now, the nice thing is we don't have to be stuck with this as a final diameter because we can actually go in later and change the size of that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to attach that circle onto this here. And I'm going to go in here. And I could actually create all of this as one piece, but I just want to break it all apart here. So I've got spline selected. This is allowing me to select this spline here and here. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to say detach, and I'm going to break them off into a separate object. So if we go down here, you can see we have the option to detach, and we need the name of that. So I'm going to call it spline SBL, and it's going to be steering wheel hub. So we'll just call it steering wheel underscore hub, let's say, and say OK to that. And we're going to get this spline, the original one that we created, and we're going to give it a similar name. We're going to call it spline steering wheel bracket, let's say. Not necessarily an accurate name, but it'll do for now. And now if we go into perspective mode, we can see there's our shape. So this is going to be the inner shape, and this is going to be the actual center of the steering wheel itself. So just press F4 there to just show wireframe so we could see our selection a bit better. So I've now selected the inner shape, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up to modifiers, and I'm going to say extrude. And for now, we'll just give it any old size, let's say 3 units. And I'm going to do the same thing for this shape also. In fact, I can actually just grab that extrude modifier and dump it on there. Now we've got them both the same kind of size. You can see that it's maybe a little bit too big. So let's go for 2. And the same for this, 2. It's not bad. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap these into position on top of the steering column. And to do that, I want to make sure that when I snap the center one, this goes along with it. So the easiest way to do that is to make it into a hierarchy. So we're just going to get this, let's say you're a child of this object here. And now when I move this, they both move at the same time. So I can now zoom out, and I'm just going to use the quick snap tool here just to snap it on there. You can see it didn't actually align it, so let's just undo that. Actually, we won't bother undoing it, we'll just fix it. We'll just go like this, use the normal snap feature. We've got this object selected, the center point. So I'm just going to select here. Now we have all the options. We want to align it as well. So now it's actually aligned in there. You can see that when it aligned it, the two Z axes aligned and it's now facing down the column. I actually wanted to go the opposite direction. So let me just rotate this around here. 90 degrees, another 90 degrees. There we are. It's now rotating in the other direction. You can see we now basically have the center of our steering wheel here. Let's just modify it so it's a little bit prettier. Now this is still too large, so we'll change this so it's what, 1.33. And we'll change this so this is actually slightly smaller, 1.25. So this is now proud of it, as you can see. And let's maybe think about adding some more detail to this. Maybe it's not quite as pretty as we want it to be, make it a little bit more fancy. We could just change this so it's a little bit longer, let's say. Just pull this up here slightly so we can see some of the detail down here. And what I want to do now is show you how we can use the instancing feature so that we can edit this on a flat plane. So let me just have a look at the world rotation of this. You can see it's rotated on its axis, and the world position as well. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, you can see it's up here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to shift instance this over here, and I'm just going to move this so we basically we need to be in world mode for this. Go to world mode. I'm just going to snap this down here. Just go to rotation, snap that back to 0. So it's now at the world center point. It's just easier to modify when it's like this. We can go into top view, zoom in on it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get rid of this. Well, actually, we can keep the extrude for now. I'm just going to turn it off. Go down to the editable spline. What I want to do is, in the end, I'm going to have 3 spokes coming out here, which will actually attach onto the steering wheel. So I want to create a kind of 3 grooves in here to make it a little bit more interesting. So let's do that by using some circles, and we'll just basically scoop some shapes out of here, and we'll have 3 of them to do that. I'm just going to create a circle here, and I'm just going to move it into this kind of position here. It doesn't have to be super accurate. And let's say that would be probably too harsh. Not really the kind of shape that I want. So what I want is a larger radius on the circle. So let's just make it like that. Let's move it into position so it's kind of glancing. Make it larger again. Like that. I think that would be nice. If we scoop that out, that would give us a nice kind of like little detail there. So now I've got this like this. I'm just going to go in, affect the pivot point, snap, click on here, and it's now aligned it to the center of here. So now we can actually rotate this circle, and it will actually rotate around this object here. So we're going to go local, and now, as I said, I can rotate it around here. And what we want to do is we want to rotate 120 degrees. So actually, what the easiest thing to do here would be to do a type in. So I'm just going to hold down shift and move it. Not actually going to move it, I'm just going to copy it in place. I'm going to do is an instance for now, so we can make an adjustment later to the actual shape of it. So we'll OK that, and do it again. And now I'm going to just type in here 120 degrees. And I'm going to select this shape here. Don't forget there's 2 shapes on this spot. So I'm going to change this one to 240 degrees. So now we have these 3 shapes cutting in here. Maybe they're not cutting in enough. Actually, I think they're okay, to be honest. But what we'll do is, you can see they're not aligned to this particular groove here. So what I'll do is just select here, here, and here. Just going to turn off snaps. I'm just going to rotate this round. I'm going to say world, and now I'm just going to rotate this around. Just using their shared center. Till I get something which is a bit more sort of symmetrical looking. Yeah, I think that looks quite nice there. So now we just need to add these into the shape. So I'm just going to go and say, go down here, attach. Now, when you do so, you may actually have problems because these are instance. So the best thing to do for now is to break the instancing on these. So let's go here, down here, attach. Ah, yeah, there you go. You can see what I mean. We've now got this shape being created here. Because they're instances of each other, anything that we do here is actually replicated up here on the steering column. And they're kind of overlapping each other, so don't be too distracted by this. It's not a problem. So now we just attach this one here and this one here. And I'm going to go into splines, and I'm going to say subtract. So I'm going to say Boolean subtract that shape there. Boolean subtract that shape there. And this shape here. And now we've got this nice 3-pointed shape, which we'll have the actual pivots, sorry, the spokes of the steering wheel coming out of later. We can go up here, turn on our extrusion, go into perspective mode and have a look at that. You can see now we've got quite a nice, interesting looking steering wheel here. Pretty cool. We can actually delete this now, we don't need it. We were just using it as a way of modeling more cleanly. And you can see that at the moment this is actually not aligned, so we'll actually have this aligned. It doesn't have to be really, because obviously on a real car the rotation would not necessarily be aligned in any way. Let's just turn on the snaps here. In this case we'll go for, there we are, 95 degrees. Not quite. There we are. So now it's aligned. So now we've got this nice, interesting head to the steering wheel. So we need some kind of way to hold this on here. So let me just move this down here a little bit. We need some way to kind of hold this on. So I'm going to put a hole in here not in this particular DVD, but in the last DVD in the series, we'll put a hole in here. But for now, we'll imagine that hole is there. Let's just move this up here, move it down. And that hole is going to allow a pin to go through here and hold this in place. So let's just create that pin. So I'm going to go into top view and let me just create a circle here to give myself a guide. And I'm going to say that is 0.7. So it matches the size of this here. We know the kind of size that we have to go through. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move this up here, make a copy of it. I'm going to change the radius. Sorry, that was an instance, so we just need to break the instancing. Move that down here. This is going to be part of the pin. So I'm going to go right click, convert to editable spline, go in here, select this vertex here. I'm going to break it. So now they're independent. And I'm just going to move these down here. Actually, let me just select both vertices. And just move these down here. So you can see now it's starting to form a pin. Let's move this up here. And now I need to edit these. Let me just turn these into a Bezier corner. Select one. And we'll just make sure that we have the right axis selected so we can edit this. I'm going to move that like that. That like that. And just move this over here. We're going to do a similar kind of thing for this here. Just move this up here so it's nice and straight. And zoom out. Now what we need to do is we need to basically put in some center points here. So I'm just going to say refine here and here. This just needs to be moved over so it's straight. And I'll just move this in here, this in here. Look at these two, just make sure they're kind of symmetrical. Not bad. At the moment the interpolation is causing a problem because the optimize is actually making it become too linear too quickly, so that's not looking too bad as a pin, let's say. So what we need now is a profile for that. So we'll go for, let's say, a rectangular pin. And we'll just make it this kind of size. We'll just use the corner radius feature. Actually have to use a very small value there. That's fine. What we need now is a loft. So let's select our path. Let's just go into compound objects, loft. We'll just pick this shape here. And now let's just check out what this has come out like. Go into perspective mode. Yeah. Luckily, the shape is actually in the orientation that we wanted it to be. You can see it's producing a nice pin. And now all we need to do is basically align that pin. So I'm going to call this Geo Steering Wheel Pin. And I'm just going to use the snap and align feature on here. So just pick that, just select on there. And now we just need to put it into position. Let's look at that. Not bad. Just drag it up here a little bit. Just slot it down here. Let's make sure it's in the right kind of height. So it needs to be quite snug. So we'll put it like that. And we'll put a hole in here, as I said, in the last DVD in the series, just to allow that pin to go through. And that will then hold the steering column in place, if you can imagine. Let's say we wanted that pin to look like it was flaring out a little bit more. So it looked like it was straining against here a bit better. So for that, we could just go down here, zoom in, and edit it. So we'll just move this out here a bit, move this out here. It's a little bit flared now. There we are. We have our pin in place. Pretty cool. And now we'll turn our attentions to the last thing in this chapter, which is the screw thread on the end of here. So for that, we need a helix. So let's go in here, create a helix. I tend to actually create the helix rather than doing it interactively. I tend to do it as a type in, because doing it interactively is too fiddly usually. So radius 0.7, 0.7, height, let's say 2 for now. And the number of turns, whatever. We can actually adjust this later. I'll say like that. This is a separate object, so we can actually snap to this. So let's do so. Okay, now we have this in place. Let's zoom in. I'm just going to change the radii by eye until we have roughly the right kind of thing going on here. You can see it's something like 0.5 by 0.5. Close. Almost. That will actually do. Even though we can't see it, it's fine for what we want. We'll move it down till it actually starts just outside here. There's no point wasting geometry inside here. And let's just move this out here a little bit more, so we use as much as we can. So there we are. Now the height is wrong, so we just want to adjust that until it just comes to here. Okay, so not quite there. There we are, it's now inside here. If we go to wireframe mode, you can see it. It being slightly too small is fine, because what we're going to do now, we're going to create the thread itself. Let's go into top view, and we know it's going to be very small. So I'm just going to draw it. I'm going to say corner, and let's say corner, corner. So it needs to be this about half the size, let's say, of the pin profile. So I'm just going to create a little triangle, say yes. And now I'm going to make sure that's in the middle there. Yeah, roughly right, isn't it? So just push this up here. And now I'm going to say Bezier corner. Make sure I'm in the right 2 axes here. Hold on shift to break that. Shift to break that. What I'm after here is something which is basically symmetrical. That will do as our profile. We don't actually need this edge here. We'll just keep it for a second, just so I can actually align the pivot point to it. There we are. Now I'm going to go in and just get rid of that segment. And this is going to be our screw thread. So let's just move it down so it's a little bit closer to us, down here, where we need to be. And now we need to zoom out here, and we're going to create another loft, where in this case, it's going to be using this helix in here. So let's go here and say loft, get shape, pick here. And you can see now we've got a very basic screw thread. Let's have a look if the alignment has worked. Not quite sure if it has actually. So let's just modify our helix path so it stands out a little bit more. There we are. I'll just change this to what, 8 and 8. I think it's basically sitting on the surface now. So no, you can see that I think it's at 90 degrees to what it wants to be, what it should be. Yeah. So what we can do is, it's a little bit trial and error this, but we can go into loft, shape, select the shape. Let's have a look at it in wireframe mode. You can actually see, yeah, there, it's not too bad actually. That's in the right kind of position. Let me have a look if it's sticking out here fine. Yeah, it's not bad. But it looks like as it goes down, it's twisting. So let's have a look if we've got some kind of deformations going on there. So let me just come out of sub-object mode and have a look at my feeling is that the contour and banking features in this case are working against us. So let's try turning off contour. That's actually going to produce a flat shape. As you can see, it's getting very thin at the edges there and then working here, but then getting very thin again. So we need contour. Let's try turning banking off. And yeah, you can see now it's actually keeping a constant shape all the way along its length. Shape steps, 0. Well, we've got a curve there, so we need some steps into the shape to do that. And then let's have a look at this in 3D. Not bad. As a thread, maybe it's not quite spirally enough. So let's just try and select the underlying path here. And there we have it. And now we can change the number of steps, number of turns, until we have the screw thread that we need. Let me just turn off wireframe. So now you can see that we have a pretty good screw thread here, onto which we could put a bolt. And that's looking pretty cool, eh? We'll leave it as this color for now. It looks a little bit strange. It looks like it wouldn't blend, but that's just because the two objects have a different wireframe color. But we could actually change that. Just select the two and pick a color up here so they're both unified. And you can see now it blends in very nicely. If you put a nice metallic shader on there, that would look even better. And you can see that it's actually standing a little bit out from the surface here. So when you see it at this angle, you can actually see it's standing out here. That's very easy to fix. We just need to get the path and then just modify that slightly so it's, say, 7.5, which is why originally I had it slightly inside the surface. You just make that 7.5, 7.5, and you just basically adjust it until you get something that sits completely flush with the surface. Still not quite there, so let's try 7.0. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Put a metallic shader on that, and that would look like a really nice screw thread. And then on top of that, we just need a bolt. So for that, we can just use this shape. Sorry, not the actual spline. I'm after the... there we are. So we can just move that up here. We'll just say it's a copy. We'll say 6 sides. Fillet segments. Let's say just as minimum as we can. Radius, just pop it out until it's the right kind of size. Turn off smoothing. Reduce the height slightly until we've got a bolt on there. And then we can just move this up slightly so it actually sits on the surface nice and flush. Still not quite big enough, is it? So let's just change the radius. Oh yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. So now you have the bolt, and then you also have the screw thread. If you want this screw thread to be different, you can actually go down here, modify this profile, make it larger, more curvy, whatever, and you can actually modify your screw thread, make it work just the way that you want to. So before we finish off in this chapter, let's just create a new area here where we can actually keep... I'm just going to freeze the elements that we modeled in the previous chapter. Actually, we can't quite do that yet because this has been the active layer while we were modeling these elements. So when we actually model them, they got put into this layer. So we need to put them into a different layer now. So let me just select these different elements here and also down here. I'll just select this and also the different elements there and also the profile. Let me just make sure I've got that. Yeah, I have. So now I can create a new layer and we'll call this spline elements, and let's make sure that we have that correct. We'll just hide them for now. And now everything that we've modeled in this chapter should be invisible. Yeah, it's like all the shapes are missing. Everything's gone. We haven't got the head there. That's cool. We can just show that again, and we can just freeze the primitive elements again. And we can then freeze our spline elements. Well, we'll leave it unfrozen for now so that we can work on new elements in the next chapter. And actually, let's just freeze it actually, and we'll just put the default layer as the active layer. There we go. We've modeled the head of the steering column. We've created some grooves in here for this element to fit onto. We've put a pin in here to hold this on. In the fourth DVD, we'll actually refine this a little bit further. And at the bottom of the steering column, we created some screw threads for the bolt here. So I've just shown you very quickly how to create some nice screw threads there. Let's move on now into the next chapter, where we'll start modeling some more elements of our go-kart.